Hello and welcome to another edition of the Sunbelt Hoops podcast with Matt and Nate. We're now in postseason play. James Madison in the NCAA Tournament. We're going to do a deep dive on them, talk about where they're seated and where they're going to be playing. We're also going to talk about App State. They get into the NIT and they're playing Wake Forest. We'll hear from Texas State Coach T.J. Johnson about his Bobcats, and we'll also pick his brain on his expertise in regard to these tournaments that we just talked about. Arkansas State also getting some postseason run. They're going to be playing in the CBI, and they're going to open up against Bethune Cookman. Troy's coach, Scott Cross, gets a well-deserved 4-year contract extension. We'll hit on that, and then we'll close out today's podcast with some ironic thoughts from Nate Ross on the tournament and maybe predictions. I haven't done my whole bracket yet, Nate. I haven't done the deep dive, so I'm not really ready to make total predictions. I can tell you who I think's really good, but I haven't even picked a Final Four yet. I got to do a little bit more research. I'm not that fast. We're less than, at the time we're talking here, we are a little about 15 hours after they announced the bracket. I'm not near that fast at picking teams. I try to be a little bit more deliberative.
Last night, I was watching ESPN like 3 or 4 hours after they select the teams. 5 million entries at that point already. And if you do that during the tournament, they'll show you where you rank in the 5 million. I've not done mine yet either. But 5 million in a couple hours, people are kind of interested in this thing.
I'd be willing to bet that none of those 5 million will win. I mean, either that or you're a savant and you've got this thing figured out. But if you can take a look at matchups, how many total matchups? There's 68 teams in the thing.
Yep.
The total amount of matchups and have it figured out in that short a time, more power to you. I can't do that. I'll do one bracket. I'm not going to do multiple brackets. I'll do one bracket, right, and I'll try to pick it to the best of my ability, which is I've never won. And I've never won a tournament pool.
When we were at Appalachian State, which was a long time ago, and there weren't 5 million entries, we had a pool in the office. And one of the secretaries, Bobby Kremen's secretary, would always ask me, Nate, what colors is this team? What color is this team? That's how she'd pick it, and she won. So with the analytics.
It really is about as good as a system as you can have. When you see the people who get paid a lot more than we do to make these kind of predictions, and they don't even come close, then that tells you just how much of a toss-up jump ball this is on some of these picks. And when you pick up 14 beating a 3 or something like that, come on, really? Quite often, I'll reach out and try to do something like that, and there will be a 14 beating a 3, just not the 14 that I picked.
Always.
All right. Yep. So let's go James Madison here to start off the show. They're playing Friday at 8:40 Eastern in Brooklyn against Wisconsin, the number 5 seed, and there's no doubt this is going to be a very popular 12 upset 5 seed in people's brackets. And the 5-12 matchup has traditionally become the bracket of choice, the spot of choice for people to pick their upsets. I'd have to do a numbers run on that thing to figure out if it's more in our heads or if it's actual reality. But this will be a popular pick, which kind of scares me because everybody's going to be on James Madison, or a lot of people are going to be on James Madison, which scares me, which means it probably won't happen if everybody's on it, right? But Wisconsin, the 5 seed, they finished up as the Big Ten tournament runners-up at 22-13. They beat number 1 Purdue, in the semis. Then they went down to the wire before losing to Illinois in the final. Dukes, of course, have the longest winning streak in the country at 14 games. They haven't lost since January 27th. That's another thing that scares me. It's kind of like a hitting streak. When it gets to a certain number, you just expect, it's going to stop because you can't keep hitting and can't keep winning all the time, right? So that kind of scares me a little bit. But JMU does have a little bit of a history of first-round matchups. None of it recent history. None of it that really matters and has no bearing on this game. But back 40 years ago, they did pull off first-round upsets of Georgetown, Ohio State, and West Virginia. But this is their first tournament since 2013 when they were a 16 seed. They won a first 4 game and then lost to Indiana in the field of 64. Just your thoughts on all of that historical information I just threw at you. Is anything about any of that stuff that I just mentioned jump off the page at you?
That it's ancient history. The thing while you were saying that about a streak is I remember what Coach Byington told us on one of our previous podcasts. And when I talked to him earlier in the season before I did his last regular season game at Coastal Carolina, he said, I try to impress upon our guys, and so far so good. Let's go 1-0 today. That's what they did in the tournament. That's what they did in the regular season and that streak at the end. So if they can continue with that mindset, it's a good thing. You know, I looked up Wisconsin's schedule. First game of the year, they beat Arkansas State really badly, 105-76. But they're not a prolific, high-scoring team. They only average 75 a game and give up 69 a game. JMU was leading the nation in scoring early in the season. So they want to get up and down. They want to play with a little more pace. Wisconsin does have some size.
Oh, yeah.
They start 6'2", 6'4" in the backcourt, but in the front court, they start 6'7", 6'9", 7 foot. So they're bigger. They're going to be bigger than James Madison, but that's not necessarily quicker than James Madison. And I think that'll be an advantage for guys like Bickerstaff inside, for guys like Terrence Edwards. Noah Friedel on the outside will be matched up with a guy similar to his size. But it's can JMU do what they do all year, I think, and take, in this case, Wisconsin out of what they want to do. They've been really good at it all year with steals, with deflections, and taking a team out of what they want to do defensively. Or is Wisconsin just going to pound it inside and try to beat them up inside? They can score a lot of points, but it's not what they want to do, speaking of the Badgers.
Yeah, the other commonalities in their opponents are Michigan State, of course, which James Madison beat there at Michigan State, opening game of the season. And Wisconsin went 2-0 against the Spartans, beating them there, beating them in Madison as well. So not a whole lot of, both of them wins against Michigan State, which was what ended up being a 10 seed, I think, or something of that nature here in the tournament. They're not a very deep team, Wisconsin. Really, about 6 players play the bulk of their minutes. So I think tempo could be a big thing here in favor of the Dukes. If they're able to stay out of foul trouble, play a lot of guys, keep the pace up around the 80 points per game mark, which they have flourished at this season. I think that could be a winning factor for them if the Dukes can indeed pull off this upset and beat Wisconsin. Could be the tempo of the game.
And every coach will tell you, you can't take the ball out of the net and run a fast break effectively, so you got to make stops. But JMU gets a lot of break opportunities because of live ball turnovers, because of steals, because of just taking you out of what you want to do, make you make a mistake. Then they take advantage of it very, very quickly. When you look at Wisconsin, their leading scorer is a 6'7" forward. He averages 16 a game. The 7-footer averages 11 a game, and the other forward averages 11 a game. So it's not like they got a guy that's going to light up for 35 points. Possible, but not likely. And I agree 100%. The tempo of the game and the way James Madison gets their points. If they can get live ball turnovers and get second chance points off a team that's on paper bigger than them, I think they got a heck of a shot.
Yeah, so, the points that you make, James Madison, I think, was top 2 or 3 in the country in 3 field goal defense, 28% for their opponents. And then they were top anywhere between 10 and 15, I believe, in steals per game. So they were live ball turnovers plays into that. As far as you mentioned Wisconsin and their players, here's, and I agree with you, here's where the issues lie for the Dukes. 7-foot center Stephen Kroll averaged 11.2 points per game, 7 rebounds per game. But he also can hit the three, can step out and hit the three. He's good for about 1 a game, 25 threes on the season, 45.5% on his threes. So you got a 7-footer that can step out and hit the three. And then in the Big Ten tournament, he was 6 of 13 on his threes and averaged 14.5 points per game. That's going to be a big challenge. To me, that sounds like Jalen Carey's going to get maybe even more run because he's the one big body, I think, that they have that can maybe not totally match up with this guy, but down low is a big body on this guy. The leading scorer, you mentioned 6'7" sophomore guard, A.J. Storr, right at 17 points per game. Hits a third of his threes. He's 33%, 48 three-pointers made on the season. He gets to the line more than anybody else on the team. So he's a big guy, 6'7" sophomore, guard that can hit the three, can also dribble, drive, and get to the line. He's going to score. And 6'9" grad forward Tyler Wall, that's another matchup issue. So you're talking about 7 foot, 6'9", 6'7", three of their top three scorers right there. He's 10.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and he gets to the line the second most on the team. To me, that's the Duke's biggest issues is those three guys right there.
Well, a lot of times, and this is not a JMU issue, I don't think, when you have a 7-footer on the other team that can take and make threes, as you just said in the tournament, you got to get your 6'9", 6'10" guy to get out there, and that's a long way for him to go. That's not the case for JMU. Wooden can move his feet. Carey can move his feet. T.J. Bickerstaff can get there easily. So they can get there on the catch and bother that, not the shot, but bother the player as he catches the ball. And that's a great factor because, once again, they're not as big, but I think they're quicker. I know they're quicker. And I'm telling you, they take away what you do best. And I think they've been working on it. They're going to keep working on it. I'm not telling Coach Byington what to do. It's what they've done all season. They take you out of your comfort zone. And when they can take away that stuff and make you do something you're not 100% comfortable with, Coach Byington calls it make you play left-handed. I think it's an advantage for them. The moment will not be too big for them. They went into Michigan State and won first game of the year. So they know what an environment, and an NCAA first-round environment is not greatly enhanced by one team because everybody wants to see the games. Everybody's going to be there. They'll have a contingent of fans, but it won't be 100% Wisconsin fans. So I think they got a good shot.
Guard. Backcourt, you got 6'2" junior point guard Chucky Hepburn. He runs the offense, 133 assists. He's 3-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio. He averages 9 points a game. And you got 6'4" junior guard Max Klesmet. He's their top three-point shooter, 61 threes on the season, so basically 2 a game. He's 39% and right at 10 points per game.
He and Friedel will be interesting to watch.
Yeah, that's a good matchup, no doubt about it. So if they win, likely will face the number 4 seed Duke Blue Devils. You would have the Dukes versus the Duke. Of course, Duke has to get by 13 seed Vermont. Vermont's, they've had a history of knocking some teams off, and so
for sure.
I don't just naturally just pencil or pin in Duke. Maybe pencil in Duke right there, and I'm gonna go with James Madison. I think this is a tough matchup against Wisconsin, but I'm gonna pick James Madison simply because I can't pick against them. I can't pick them to not win and then pull for them on game day. So in order to pull for them on game day in my bracket, I got to pick them.
Sure.
So I'm gonna go with that one. Your thoughts? You like them against Wisconsin, and just a little thought on if they play Duke in the second round.
I do. In fact, I read something on Twitter this morning. I think it said there are 2 or 3 teams that's mascot are the Dukes. And neither of them are Duke in this tournament. So there's a little, there's a little trivia for you.
It wouldn't make sense.
But, I like them against Wisconsin because of the matchup. If they were the 9th seed in the Sun Belt Conference and by great upsets won the tournament, and then they got to go play Wisconsin, not so much. They've been there, done that. They've won a great streak of games. They've won great games against very good opponents in the Sun Belt. And obviously, we just talked about Michigan State. And I think they'll be ready. They were not overwhelmed by winning the tournament. Of course, they were happy. Of course, they were excited. But they wanted to keep going. A lot of teams are so fired up that they won the conference tournament that the NCAA is, it's icing on the cake, but, we did what we did. I don't think they're there yet. I really don't. I think that they have more to accomplish. They've got some upperclassmen that want to do some things. T.J. Bickerstaff did it with another team, and now he's going to do it again with the Dukes. So, I like him against Wisconsin. The next round against, if it's Duke, maybe not so much. If it's Vermont, a lot.
That's even tougher, yeah, no doubt. TJ, by the way, you mentioned Bickerstaff. He was on last week's podcast, so if you missed that, you can go back and look at our podcast and hear what he had to say about winning the conference championship and getting ready for the NCAA. That was on last week's podcast. All right. App State gets a shot in the NIT. They will play at Wake Forest. Great regional matchup there in the state of North Carolina. And, the way I look at this for App State, Nate, this is a chance for them to finish the season strong, the right way. They had a great season. The disappointing finish does not mean it was a disappointing season, but now they get a chance to finish the season the right way, finish it strong, get some wins, maybe make a run in this thing, and go as far as they can in the NIT and put the bad taste of that Arkansas State heart-ripping out loss in the semifinals when the Red Wolves beat them at the buzzer.
Well, if people don't know, I used to coach at Appalachian State, and I'm not saying that because I'm going to pull for them. I'm saying that because the biggest fan base in the state of North Carolina is in Winston-Salem and Charlotte for App State. Now, they traveled up the mountain for a lot of games this year against Auburn and various teams like that to fill that arena in Boone. But Joel Coliseum, I think, will be just as many, if not more, App State fans, black and gold for both sides, so you really couldn't tell till the game starts.
Right.
Just as many App State, if not more, App State fans than it will be for Wake Forest. I have a good friend that's an assistant coach at Wake Forest, used to be with us at Appalachian with Coach Cremens. For the Duke game, for the North Carolina game, they sell out the building. For the other games, not so much. They have good crowds because they had a really good season. But I think this is going to be a great game for the fans to go watch. I think Appalachian will have a huge contingent of fans there. And I think they can play with Wake. Appalachian can play with anybody inside who's leading shot blocker in the nation. Those guys have some unfinished business, as you just alluded to, after the Arkansas State loss. And they got some nice pieces that can play. The backcourt, as we saw early in the season against Auburn, blew by the Auburn guards. And Auburn's really quick as they finish the season really strong. They're going to give Wake some troubles. Their defense, unlike JMU, plays it a different way, but they play it very effectively. And if you do get to the rim, you got Absam inside and Spillers to knock it away. So Wake is not a dominant, huge team inside. They're very balanced in their scoring. But I think they got a shot against Wake. I really do. I think it's going to be a great game to watch for the fans.
That's Wednesday, 8 o'clock at Joel Coliseum in Winston-Salem. So as you mentioned, Wake does get the home game. But I think a big factor in this game is going to be motivation. I believe wholeheartedly that App State's going to be highly motivated in this game. The players will be highly motivated to try to win this game. I don't know about the Winston. I don't know about the
Great point.
I don't know how motivated after going through the ACC, getting knocked out by Pitt in the quarterfinals of the ACC tournament. They've been through the conference tournament. How excited are they about NIT? They did get to the NIT quarterfinals a couple of years ago under Coach Steve Forbes. Always been a big Steve Forbes fan going back to his days at East Tennessee State. I like what he does. Think he's a great coach for Wake. Think he's done a really good job with Wake. But I wonder about the motivation of all this. What do you think?
No, that's a great point. The ACC tournament in the state of North Carolina, of course, the tournament was in D.C. this year, is the biggest thing ever. Always has been. People say if it's not the Greensboro Coliseum, it's not the ACC tournament. Well, that's not the case. But it's a huge thing to win it. And when you get knocked out early, that's a great point about Wake. Whether they are motivated or not, we don't know. I agree 100%. Appalachian will be fired up and ready to go for this one because of the great season they had and because of the way their season ended in Pensacola. So, yeah, I didn't think about that, but that's a very good point. And I give the edge to the Mountaineers in the motivation factor.
Hey, it's a different world. The SEC football media days are going to be in Dallas this summer. I mean, let me tell you, it's crazy. And they had the SEC men's basketball tournament in St. Louis a couple of years ago. So those thoughts about, if it's not Greensboro, it's not the ACC tournament, well, you better get used to that. But, App's not a deep team. They get the bulk of the majority of their production out of 5 players. 6'5" junior guard, Hunter Salas, 18 points per game, 74 threes. He's 41% on his threes, had 84 assists, second most on the team. 6-foot sophomore guard Kevin Miller, 15 points per game, 120 assists, their top playmaker. Got to the line 144 times, made 120 of those. top ball stealer, 45. They got 6'4" junior guard Cameron Hildreth, 13.7 points per game. 6'11" junior forward Andrew Carr, 13 points a game, 49 blocks, 6.5 rebounds per game. And then 7-foot junior post Efton Reed, 9 points per game, right at 8 rebounds per game, 33 blocks. So you got twin towers compared to what App's had. And App has Abson, and they got Spillers, but from a size standpoint, Carr and Reed are going to be bigger than those two guys. So that's going to be a little bit of an issue. And, they don't go very deep. App's going to go deeper than they do. So,
during the season,
I think in that regard, that favors App. But you gotta stop those 5 guys. Those 5 guys score about 60 points between them.
Yeah, and Appalachian, when Coach talked to us during the season, when they changed their starting lineup and when they went to the 3 or 4 guys, he always says he has 8 or 9 starters. They are deeper. They don't play with great pace, so those guys will be fresher against the 5 or 6 guys from Wake Forest. I just think it's going to be the size of Wake inside, which is not greatly enhanced over Appalachian, and the quicks coming off the bench for Appalachian in the backcourt. Can Wake handle that?
Win this game, and then you advance to the second round. App, if they win, would be either at number 4 Georgia in the second round, or Georgia's playing Xavier. If Xavier wins, I don't know whether Xavier or App would be the home team. Not sure how that would work out. But I know if Georgia wins, they'll be on the road in Athens if they're able to win that game.
Yeah, well, coaches don't think about that. Just win this one. But
that's what we do on the podcast.
That's exactly right.
We're not shackled by, we're focused on one game. We can look ahead. So
if Xavier does upset Georgia, I'm telling you, the NCAA runs the NIT now. Of course, they don't go to New York anymore. They go to Hinkle Fieldhouse in the finals.
Yeah, it's going to be in Indianapolis.
The Final Four. They might make Xavier go to Boone because they know they'll sell it out. I mean, they just will.
There's a team that went 16-17. They're going into the tournament with a losing record. You talk about appetite. What kind of fan support are you going to get? For a team that was not even 500 in the second round. So you're right. There could possibly. That's why I said I don't know if Xavier beats Georgia, and I don't know how much. And Georgia's just a game over 500 themselves.
Yep.
Georgia was erratic themselves, but Georgia was very good at Stegman Coliseum most of the season. So it'll be interesting to see what happens if we get that far. All right.
The interesting thing is, real quick, if you've never been to Boone in the springtime, and I've said this because I coached up there for a lot of years, there is no more beautiful place on this planet than Boone, North Carolina in the springtime. They'll sell it out for sure if they take them up there.
Well, maybe the NIT is going to find that out. We'll wait and find out ourselves. So, time now to bring in Texas State Bobcats head coach T.J. Johnson. T.J., thanks a lot for being with us.
Thank you guys for having me. It's a pleasure. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, great to see you too. Another great run in the Sun Belt Tournament. I know in the next year you want to have a great run in the regular season and a great run in the tournament. But
no
let's
doubt.
Look back on what your team was able to do this year. But first of all, get us caught up on what's on the agenda right now. Now that the postseason tournaments are started, the transfer portal has opened up, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. I know some coaches have been very outspoken about the timing of all this, but get us caught up on what's going on with the Bobcats right now.
Yeah, with the Bobcats, it's about the 3 R's. It's about relationships, retention, and recruiting. So that's where our focus is at right now. It's a different landscape, and we have to adjust to it. So before you used to could talk to a kid and him and his parents, and now you got to talk to a kid with him and his circle, and that's a whole different terminology, and that usually spells out NIL when you're talking about a circle. So right now we're trying to navigate through that. We've been in constant communication with our players, along with their parents and our administration, just trying to figure out what do we have to do to try to put ourselves in the best position to retain some of our good players.
Coach, have you had any time to reflect upon the season at all? And if so, couple thoughts about what you guys just went through. I know it's like the other day, but still.
Yeah, Nate, we haven't really, to be honest with you. I got off the bus in New Orleans, and I went straight to recruiting. You know, they dropped me off at the airport. I got a rental car, and I just got home yesterday. Yesterday was my first time walking in my house in over 2 weeks, and my grass looks terrible. I'm probably expecting a call from the homeowners association, but I'll take care of that on tomorrow. But no
doubt about it.
It's no time to breathe right now. I've talked to Louisiana Tech's coach. I talked to UNCG's coach. Everybody's on the same time frame, the same wavelength. You know, we would all want to be playing right now, but there's still work to be done.
Give me your opinion on the transfer portal. I want to go back to that because so many people have been outspoken about the timing of it, opening up now, while teams are getting ready for tournaments and all that kind of stuff. And then you got to think about your roster. And I don't blame the kids. It's a business decision the way the thing is set up. It's kind of like the NBA draft. It doesn't hurt you at all. Put your name in there, see what kind of response you get. And a kid doesn't necessarily have to be disenchanted or unhappy with the program at all. But if you get a better opportunity, you jump at the better opportunity or what they perceive to be a better opportunity. So it's great for the kids in that regard. It's not great for the programs in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, one of my mentors told me this morning, and he said, TJ, I'm looking at some of your guys go ahead on and putting their name in the portal. He said, but man, the portal, give it and the portal take it. So it's one of those things to where, the same places where they're going, it's the same place that you're going to be taken from. So what I'll tell you about the portal, as long as it's a thing, it's going to continue to be a thing. As long as it's open and guys have the opportunity to do that, they're going to do it. And I'm not for it or against it, but it's just the reality of what it is that we're dealing with. What I will tell you is I think the lasting effect of it, for anybody that's privileged enough to have a young lady that's their daughter, and they're going to have to deal with the reality of, for whatever the reason. I think at the end of the day, when you're trying to raise men and you're trying to raise husbands and fathers, like sometimes you have to work through some things. And I think that when it comes down to it, I think that the way that is set up and the reasons why guys tend to do what they do, it's going to be pretty hard on the next generation of mothers and wives.
Coach, that's just what I was going to bring that up. I coached a long time ago, but part of the deal, forget the X's and O's, was teaching young men, or if you're a women's coach, more young women, how to deal with adversity, how to fight through the tough times. Not to say, I quit, I'm going somewhere else. I mean, that would eat me up as a coach. Not that somebody leaves, but that I didn't teach them about life.
Yeah, no doubt. I think you only got two types of players. You got the players that are okay with looking out the window, and you got the players that are okay with looking in the mirror. And when it comes down to the transfer portal, you get a feeling that some are looking out the window. And when you're dealing with your marriage, most of the time, you got to look in the mirror.
Yep.
No doubt. As far as your team coming back, and you don't know who's going to be in the transfer portal, even if they are in the transfer portal, whether they actually leave or not. But based upon what, when you walked off the floor in Pensacola, what you got coming back, looks like you pretty much have everybody eligible to come back and play for you next year. Is Drew Drennan going to be able to play again? Because of his injury? Tyrell Morgan, he had the injury, only played in a game and a half. Are those guys going to be back? What does the future look like as far as the team that walked off that floor in Pensacola after playing James Madison about as tough as anybody did the entire season?
Yeah, as far as the Bobcats are concerned, we only graduate one senior, and he was a fifth-year guy. So, we're eligible to come back.
That's
now,
Dawson, right? Dylan Dawson?
No, actually, Dawson has a COVID year. So I'm expecting I'm expecting even us to have the opportunity to retain Dylan Dawson. That is Chris Nix, the transfer from UT Martin.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So, on paper, we look very attractive to be competitive in the Sun Belt for next year. But, like I know, the average team across the country is losing 2, maybe 3 players per year to the transfer portal. And I don't think we're going to be any different. I think that we're going to have some guys jump in the portal that's going to change some things for us. But also, at the end of the day, we're going to have an opportunity to bring in guys that fit and guys that are committed and want to be here. So, I'm excited about what we have. I think we have a good core. As far as Drew Drennan and Tyrell Morgan, we're fully expecting those guys to be granted their appeal and be able to come back and finish out their career the way that they had hoped to this year. So knowing that we have a solid foundation with those two guys, I think the sky's the limit for what we can do if we can bring in the right guys and build up around them.
Coach, in looking at the big picture, I remember it's a dead period when the NCAA Final Four finally comes and you get a break. But you also have the National Association of Basketball Coaches, NABC, that meets and all kinds of meetings and stuff. Is there anything that body can do to kind of regulate this stuff along with the NIL, or is that something that's being worked on? I'm just curious about the process going forward.
Yeah, I think it's talked about. I've been in those meetings. I think it's talked about, and it's extremely difficult to put the genie back in the bottle as we're seeing.
Sure.
And we went from one extreme to the next, and now we're trying to figure out a middle ground. I think what tends to happen is court. And when people go to court, things change mid-shift. So
Yep.
that's basically what's happening. We're trying to find a system that works for everybody, and then and I don't know if that's going to be possible. So I think it's going to be the next 2-3 years are going to be extremely challenging for what we know of college basketball to be. I'll tell you this. I spoke to one of my administrators, and I asked her. I said, what's going to become of the NCAA and basketball and sport in the next couple of years? She says, I'm not sure, but I won't be around to see it. So it's one of those things where people are seeing the writing on the wall, and I'm not so sure that they want to go that far down the road with it.
How about second year in a row, you guys win 3 games in the Sun Belt Tournament. I know you'd much rather be getting that double bye and not playing until Saturday in the quarterfinals, but you've proven to be a great underdog team, if you want to call it that. I don't know how much of an underdog you guys actually were, because you played really, 2 different seasons, the one that started out 1-8 and then the one that went 10-4 in your last 14 games. And as we talked about throughout the course of the tournament, so much of that just had to do with devastating injuries and you not having a full roster. And once you got your full roster, you guys were out there actually competing with the teams at the top of the conference. As you look forward, and there's nothing you can do about injuries, but as you reflect on it, is there, anything other than praying that you don't get hit by hard injuries again next year you can do about it?
Yeah, even in our championship years, we've had injured guys, and we tend to forget about it because those injured guys were some guys that may have not been counted on to the level that these guys have been counted on recently. But we've had season-long injuries with those guys as well, and I never really paid attention to it until this last season. I'm like, man, but it's going to happen. I think we got to do a really, really good job moving forward of making sure that there isn't much separation between, the 5th or 6th best player on the team and the 8th or 9th best player when it comes down to a couple of things. Yeah, when it comes down to a couple of things, that's playing the game the right way. That is culture, mindset. That is toughness and competing. When it comes down to those things, if we can stay in alignment with those things, we give ourselves a chance. Obviously, there's going to be some talent disparity and so on and so forth, but it shouldn't be a buy-in or a mindset. So, and that's the thing that we have to do. And because we understand that the most connected teams win. I look at Coach Sampson and what he's able to do with a depleted roster, and they're still able to win because they have guys playing hard, they have guys playing the right way, and they have guys playing together.
Coach, it's interesting. I'm listening to hear you say that. Obviously, that's about depth. How do you find, when I go back to my own career in coaching with recruiting, and you worked guys, as they say, for more than a year, how does the process work? And I just did it this morning to look at the list. There was 1,500 people last year on the transfer portal just for college basketball. And you look at the list this year, and it's obviously growing day by day, hour by hour. How do you find that stuff out about a young man when you see his name and his school on a list, and then you have a relationship with him, but it might be an hour or two on the phone.
Yeah, I'm not very good at it. You know, that's probably a Richie Riley question, to be honest with you. He's unbelievable at it. You know, I tell him all the time, I hug him, and I say, Richie, man, I don't know how you do it. And he says, see, I don't know how you do it. He said, I got to have new groups of guys every year. He said, it excites me to try to put it together. And I said, man, I struggle with it because I'm not a speed dater. And it's definitely speed dating.
That's exactly what it is.
And I'm trying to figure it out. But in the case of Colton Benson, I mean, he lives 27 miles up the road. He's been at our camp since he was a sophomore in high school. You know, Celeste Collier was his high school coach. He was a coach at Texas State. And then you're talking about his AAU teammate and Chris Turner. We were familiar with him in the league. So we look at those guys as success guys, and we want to build from that model. And I think that that's the thing that we're going to be looking for moving forward is the highest level of familiarity and also a connectivity that we can build a bond through.
It always comes
Richie
back to relationships. It just does.
Yeah.
I was going to say Richie, more than anybody I think maybe I've seen, really digs in on those D2 players, man. He finds those guys that got overlooked at coming out of high school and they've had a career in D2 and looking for a shot to prove themselves in D1. But let me ask you here, NCAA tournament starting, James Madison's going in. You just played them last Saturday and really put them to the test, like I said, as well as anybody did the entire season, maybe outside of App State, who beat them twice. But your thoughts on the James Madison-Wisconsin first-round matchup and what the Dukes have to do to get by the Badgers?
Yeah, I think it's a great matchup. I think, obviously, James Madison has had success early on in the season versus a Big Ten team. So they understand the level of physicality that you have to play with to compete against a Big Ten team. When I say conflicting styles, James Madison, they want to get up and down. They average 6 threes a game, so they're gonna be able to, they want to be able to stretch the floor and change ends. But Wisconsin, they're going to be defensive minded, and then they're going to be purposeful and methodical on the offensive end and intentional. So I think it's going to be a really, really good game. I think it's going to be a great matchup. I don't think James Madison will be overwhelmed at all. I think that they'll be as comfortable as they've been all season.
Coach, what about Coach Sampson and the Cougars? Number 1 seed. I love the way they play. I love the way Jamal Shedd plays. Obviously, he's right there in Texas. The only thing they haven't done is win the whole thing. I think they're very capable of that. Yeah,
I think so. I think what it's going to boil down to in Houston, is their ability to stay healthy. When you play that way for that long, and the expectation is to run through every single wall you see, not to go around it or under it. You have to go through it. So I think their ability to stay healthy is going to in a lack of depth, or the question of the question is going to be depth. Because we know that they can play with any team in the country. Likely they have some very interesting matchups. They could possibly match up with Texas A&M again. That was the game that the world stood still for because the Taylor kid went crazy in the game. But it was a electric game, and definitely the committee has a sense of humor and being able to put those guys in position where they can meet up again. So I wouldn't want to see Houston, and I think that you have more teams likely to not want to see them than want to see them.
Any thoughts on a Final Four? Have been able to do a deep dive and think about your Final Four yet?
I really hadn't, but early on I did, and if Marquette was healthy, they would definitely be in that lineup right there. But I do like Marquette a lot. They're dealing with some injuries themselves. But I will say this: I think UConn has to be the favorite. I think they're the most complete team in the country. I think they're the most complete team in the country. So I'll give you that one right there. And I think one of the sleeper teams in the country has to be Iowa State. I mean, if you look at what TJ's done in order to beat Houston twice, and they're just a bad matchup for anybody. I don't know if they're a good matchup for anybody. So if those guards can continue to play the way that they play, and those guys they're going to show the toughness and grit. And TJ does a phenomenal job on the offensive end. So I would say my favorite would be UConn, and my dark horse would be Iowa State.
Coach, last thing I got for you is I loved it when you said the NCAA has a sense of humor, because I believe that forever. In this case, in the East, they put UConn, Florida Atlantic, and San Diego State in the same region. 3 of the Final Four teams last year. Whether they want to call it a sense of humor or not, I love you call it. That's what I call it. I mean, you're putting only one of them is going to go to the Final Four, if any of them this year, but they put them all in the same region to start.
Yeah. I mean, you can roll the dice a lot of times and not come up with that. So, you got to do that with your eyes open, I think.
No question.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you on UConn. I mean, I know it sounds boring to go back and pick the national champions again, but I mean, I agree. I think they're the most solid team. Now, whether they can complete this 6-game stretch and be there on top at the end, that remains to be seen, and that's what makes this tournament so much fun. My last question for you is, you beat App State, only 2 teams in the conference to beat them during the regular season. You did it late in the season, about mid-February. They'll be playing against Wake Forest in the first round of the NIT. What do you think about App State and Wake Forest and their chances of making a run in the NIT?
I think App State is a lot like JMU when it comes down to they have the size and the physicality in the experience. So those guys won't blink. I think the thing about App State when it comes down to playing against Wake is going to be guard play. I think the guards are going to have to make some shots. They got one of the most phenomenal bigs in the country, but you're playing against Wake Forest that is going to be prepared. And, a lot of it's going to be on whether or not they can stretch the floor and make some shots in that particular game. So from the standpoint of whether or not they belong, they absolutely belong. One of the best team in our league from end to end. And they showed it when they went head to head versus JMU, a team with only 3 losses, and they gave them 2 of the 3 losses. So, I'm excited. I think the league is well represented. I think it found a way to work out. The 2 best teams are playing in the 2 in the 2 highest tournaments that there is, and I'm proud that those guys are representing our league.
Coach, I'll give you one last tidbit before we let you go.
Okay, go ahead.
UConn, it seems like 10 years ago, I'm sure it was only 4 or 5, I was doing an East Carolina game, and a young man named Tristan Newton was on that team, and he was okay, nothing great. Well, now he's one of the best players in the country as a transfer portal player for UConn, and obviously won it last year and trying to win it again this year. So the diamonds in the rough, as we used to call them, are out there, and he's definitely one.
I need to find me one of those.
Yep. Keep looking. They're out there.
They're out there. Well, Coach, thanks so much for being with us. It's always great to visit with you. We enjoy our time with you in the tournament. And good luck here as you guys dig in and get busy in the offseason.
Well, my pleasure. I appreciate you guys. And I promise you this, if I can find me one of those diamonds in the rough next year, we're going to have a better background than this. So
I got you.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you, guys. Best wishes to you.
All right, Nate. Always great to talk to T.J. Johnson. We've had such great conversations with him the last 2 years as they've been on Cinderella runs in the Sun Belt Tournament.
Yep.
So best of luck to them as they start the recruiting trail process and transfer portal process and all that kind of stuff. All right, just a couple of quick house cleaning items to touch on before we wrap up this podcast. And I guess we're just going to you and I haven't even discussed this personally. We're just doing it right here on the podcast. I don't know how long we're going to keep going. I guess as long as we got Sun Belt teams that keep winning, right? Is that the plan?
Absolutely. Absolutely. JMU wins.
As long as we got teams playing, we'll keep doing the podcast. All right. So our house cleaning items. A third team going to be in postseason play, and that's going to be Arkansas State. They're playing in the CBI, the College Basketball Invitational. It'll be the first postseason berth for the Red Wolves, I believe, since they went to the NCAA Tournament in 1999. And, that was Freddie Hicks' dad was on that team. We talked about that, during the tournament. But this is their first postseason berth since then, and they're going to open up against Bethune Cookman in the first round. I think that's going to be on the road in Daytona.
Well, Bethune Cookman better get ready for a lot of threes because they make 10 a game, and they better get ready for Freddie Hicks. Talk about a motivated team. You know, first year Coach Hodgson did an amazing job with his basketball team, changed the culture and the way they play the game. And even on the road, they're a tough basketball team to knock out because of the way they play the game.
You know, the CBI, even the NIT, because I think there were a number of opt-outs. There were like 4 or 5 teams that were invited to the NIT, St. John's being one of them. I think Ole Miss being another, chose not to play in it for various reasons, and that's, you know, that's all up to them. Not going to delve into, you know, that. But I do say this, that the NIT and the CBI is good for a lot. For Arkansas State, I think this is a good move. I mean, continue the momentum that you've established in the program, maybe finish the season with a trophy. I don't at all, I don't dismiss it at all. I compare it to like going and playing in a bowl game. You get more practices.
Right.
You get a chance to close the season with a win, which you didn't get to do. You did get to the finals, but you closed the season with a loss. Here's one more chance, and I think it's a good thing, and I'm glad to see that Coach Brian Hodgson and the Red Wolves have accepted an invitation to play in the CBI.
And it shows everybody else this system that you've instilled and how much fun it is to play. Kids get to see it. Recruits get to see it. Transfer portal guys get to see it. And, it's all good.
Our other piece of news to close out the podcast is Scott Cross gets a 4-year contract extension. I believe he gets a nice raise out of this. That is so well-deserved. I mean, there is no better coach and integrity coach and man in the conference than him. I'm not saying he's the best because we got a bunch of good ones, but he's right there. And he's such a pleasure to work with, throughout the course of the season. And he's done a tremendous job with Troy. I believe they're the only team that can brag that they've had double-digit conference wins the last 3 seasons, and they've had at least 20 overall wins the last 3 seasons. He's done a heck of a job with that program that was, inconsistent at best and on the downside, if you will, in that inconsistency, prior to his arrival. And he's made it consistent. It's just a matter of time before they break through and win the tournament and go to the NCAA tournament, in my estimation.
Well, the real reason he got the extension and the raise. It's because he came on our podcast.
Oh, is that what it was? Okay.
Oh, that's
if that's the case, we're gonna have guys. They're gonna be calling us TV on the.
You didn't get your check in the mail yet? I got mine the other day.
My check in the mail. Yeah.
It'll be there soon.
But your thoughts on what Scott's been able to do with that program?
Oh, he's done a great job. You're right. The 20-win seasons back to back to back. Injuries like everybody else has. That's just part of the game. But he's been very consistent. He is very consistent in his approach to the game and his approach to his guys, the way they play, about take the stairs. He told us a great story about that during the podcast. But, he's a good man to play for. He's a good man to play for, and it's a good way to play. And stability in college basketball is a thing you don't see a lot anymore, but they got it at Troy, and good for him and good for them.
All right, Nate, that's going to wrap up our podcast number 6. And like I said, we'll keep doing this thing as long as the Sun Belt teams keep playing basketball, which means at this point they got to keep winning. As long as they keep winning and they keep playing, we'll keep talking about it.
You want my ironies?
Oh, I forgot about I was getting ready to close it out. You've been sitting on that thing waiting to give us your NC. Oh, yeah, I'm so sorry. Let's do it.
No, that's all right. The irony is that it's ironic you forgot about it.
NCAA tournament. You did a lot of research on this stuff. I don't want to lose it. Let's go.
All right. If you haven't seen Nebraska play yet, this young man, I hope I don't mess his name up. I did it phonetically. It's Keisei Tominaga. He's a left-handed guard from Nebraska. They call him the Japanese Curry. He's number 30. He is really fun to watch, and he's a really good shooter. So if you're not a Nebraska fan, watch it just to watch him. We talked about JMU in Wisconsin. I said, and Coach T.J. Johnson also said the NCAA has a sense of humor. I believe that completely. There is a matchup in the Midwest, Utah State against TCU. Utah State has a young man that played at Coastal Carolina. named Josh Aduje from London, England, transferred to Utah State.
Chauncey
TCU
Clears could have
big-
used him.
Yes. The big man, Assam Mustafa, transferred from Coastal Carolina to TCU. So pregame warm-ups, there will be a big hug at half court. You might not see it on television, but those two guys, both from the Sun Belt, will be playing in the NCAA tournament together. Long Beach State, speaking of ironies, Coach Munson resigned or decided with the school to
Mutual
part ways
agreement.
on Monday of this week, past week. They told him he could coach in the Conference Big West tournament. He won it. Now he's going to the NCAAs. So that's going to be a little egg on the face of the school. But I did his game a couple years ago at North Carolina. Great guy. Been doing this for a long time. And the beach, as they call it, he resigns. They let him coach in the tournament. He wins the tournament. That is pretty cool. I think I got one more here. Well, we talked about it with T.J. in the East Regional. Speaking of the sense of humor, the NCAAs, there are 3 teams that were in the Final Four last year. Florida Atlantic, San Diego, and UConn. And they all can't go back to the Final Four because they're all in the same region. So a couple things I just looked at when I saw the whole bracket.
Yeah, now you call it irony. I call it the cynic in me says the NCAA looked at that Final Four last year with Florida Atlantic and San Diego State in there. 2 teams that no doubt, and I don't know how it impacted television ratings, but 2 teams that nobody, certainly not blue bloods by any means, certainly teams that nobody expected to be there, and they're like, we're going to make sure that doesn't happen again. We're sticking them in there with UConn. We're going to make sure we don't have that stuff happen again. So I do.
They'll tell you the committee does not take that into consideration. Baloney. They do.
Yeah, exactly. It just happened that way. I love that. I love when they say that. The coach that got fired by the program, and there was a lot of animosity, and then he just ends up playing him in the second round of the NCAA tournament. Just happened that way. We didn't plan it that way. So they're the masters at creating storylines and then denying that they did it. But I like UConn. I think they're strong. I like North Carolina. I think they're uber talented, obviously, and Hubert Davis has done a great job there. If Kentucky is awful scary. I mean, from just a pure NBA talent standpoint, they might be the best team in the entire field. They can rack up points. I don't know how well they play defense. They're not very well. I mean, because you look at their scores, they got so many 90, 80, 190 scores. They can score like heck. I wouldn't put it past Kentucky to make a run in this tournament as well. So, anyway, I'm going to be working on my bracket. I can't tell you who I like totally all because I haven't done the deep dive on it yet. I probably will not get it done until about 11:59 on Thursday before the tip of the first, not including the first 4 games, but before it really gets started on Thursday. I usually go down to the last minute, kind of like my taxes. Go down to the last minute before I get them done.
If you want to see something interesting, talking about the net, for the last thing I got to say is Coach Kim English at Providence, who I believe is in the tournament, they asked him about the net, and I can't say what he said because it is not G-rated, but he explained it very importantly about teams like St. John's and other teams in the Big East that, in his opinion, should have been in. So he said the net that everybody says is so important, he said, well, they didn't use it this year much at all. So different coaches, different opinions as to he's in, but he wants other teams in his league to be in.
Yeah. Thing I love about the NCAA tournament as opposed to the college football playoff, and that's getting ready to change because they're going to go to 12 and they're going to go to 14 teams. And I think out of 12 and 14, we have a real playoff, and there'll be a national champion. Not to say there hasn't been a legitimate national championship. I just think it's a much more fair fight when you get that many teams in there. I believe at 68, the NCAA, the few that get left out don't know that they would go on and win it. But I even as I say that, I wouldn't be opposed if they expanded it. I know a lot of people think that's like heresy to say expand the tournament. I wouldn't at all mind see if they expanded it another game and go up to like somewhere in the 90s, go up to 96, whatever the next derivative number is that you
Right.
need, or even go to like 128 and go 2 extra games. It's just fun to me. It would take a little bit of the drama out of the selection Sunday, I guess, because so many teams would be getting in. But when they start playing basketball, it'll be a lot of fun, that's for sure. So.
Yeah, the selection Sunday is cool, but the tournament's amazing. And I didn't used to think I wanted it to expand. Now the way talent is spread out across the country, I think it'd be cool too. I agree.
All right, Nate, we'll talk next time.
Thanks.